Hi, Andrea. Thank you so much. I'm honored to be here with you and Kenny, and I'm just very, very eager to discuss our journeys today. For those who are joining, my name is Tyler Blackburn. My pronouns are he, him. I am a true blue Chicagoan. I was born and raised in the Windy City. I currently reside here. I'm a proud husband. I'm a proud cat parent. Um, and my professional experiences, they range from working in the nonprofit space as well as the educational sector. I currently serve as a senior associate director with APCO Worldwide with my colleague Kenny. We both operate from our equity and justice practice. My day-to-day sees me practicing extensively in the DEI space and operating in the DEI space, whether that is internally for APCO. I've steered our Black ERG. I've offered counsel on our internal DEI programs and initiatives, or externally, helping clients chart their own DEI pathways and frameworks, helping them also set up their own ERGs for their companies, offering counsel on heritage months, crafting community benefits plans, or helping draft impact reports for a number of our clientele with a Kenny. I'm a first generation everything. I'm the first in my family to have gone to college, first in my family to, have obtained the level of jobs that I've had. First in my family, I think, to be queer, which is a lot. And so I'm honored to have had the courage and the dedication of those who have come before me, open up the door for me to be exactly where I am right now today with you all. So I'll kick it over to Kenny.
Thank you, Tyler. And you are a tough act to follow. And so grateful, Hunter, to be here joining you today. I love that Tyler didn't lead necessarily with his title because I am someone who doesn't define myself by my title, but by the impact that I hope to have in the world. And I think of myself really as a catalyst at large. I surface insights, I harness creativity, and I galvanize resources to close the opportunity gap. And I'm fortunate that some of my early career experiences, I started in international development, working in West Africa, had me engaging everyone from members of parliament to CEOs, from farmers to small scale traders. I was brokering partnerships, I was building alliances, I was crafting strategic communications to translate complex concepts into a framework that everyone could understand. And I think it's those early experiences that really taught me that people have more in common than they have different. And I think because of my ability to focus on those commonalities rather than differences, I've been able to help move the needle on issues like food security, on financial inclusion, on gender equity, and more. And operating with that lens has led me to some career highlights that I'm really proud of. I helped launch a sustainable Shea initiative in partnership with USAID and several governments. It was an $18 million 5-year program that has increased the livelihoods of hundreds of thousands of women across West Africa. I launched Ellis financial marketplace that allows newcomers in the US to have access to credit that won one of Fast Company's world-changing ideas a few years ago. Did the first ever Africa House at South by Southwest. And I don't think I would have been able to have those career milestones if I didn't embrace what is different about me and how that allows me to see new opportunities.
You've been busy. Oh, wow. Oh, my goodness. So awesome. I'm so excited. I'm so grateful to be here. And I am excited. We're just getting into it. This is, oh, I can feel it. I can feel the buzz. Okay. So I'm very curious. So, Akini, we'll start with you, embracing those differences of who you are. And you just listed so many incredible things that you've done so far. And I can only imagine what's coming up ahead. But with your intersectionality, how has that shaped your personal and your professional experiences? You mentioned you brought that too.
Yeah. So first, I want to start giving credit where it's due, and for those who are tuning in who aren't familiar with the concept of intersectionality, but the brilliant Kimberly Crenshaw, she coined the term in 1989, and it basically describes, how class, race, gender, other dimensions of identity intersect and overlap. And I want to start with that definition because I think sometimes people approach intersectionality as if you're giving a hierarchy to identities, or if you're trying to play what sometimes people call oppression Olympics. When in reality, I think it's a superpower because it gives you peripheral vision. It helps you see around corners. It helps you be more empathetic. It helps you relate to others. And I am a proud British born, Gambian, Kenyan, American Black woman. And that is a mouthful. But if you break it down, I think it really means that by virtue of my identity as an immigrant, I'm always thinking about broader global trends. I'm seeking to cross pollinate learnings across borders. Because I'm Kenyan, I had a very early exposure to the advances in financial technology in that country and had an ability to bring that lens to how to help shape how we think about financial technology and payments in the US. Because I'm an immigrant, I understand what it means to come to this country and not have access to credit and not be able to apply for a mortgage. And I immediately understand the nuances of the realities that face the over 1 million immigrants that come to this country every year. And because I'm a Black woman, I know that when you solve for issues that face Black women, you solve for many of the most complex socioeconomic challenges that face us all. And I could go on, but I think those are just a few examples of how that peripheral vision comes up because of the virtue of my identity.
I love that as a metaphor. So you can see more around you. You can be focused on this thing that you're working on ahead, but you also have that information as well. I love that. No horse blinders in this, you know. Tyler, how about you?
Well, I'm really happy that Akinyi led with that definition just to level set the stage for us today. For me, I'm an avid food lover. I'm an avid baker. I'm a person who loves to just make people happy by cooking for them. And so it's
Mm.
only natural for me.
So how's next week for you? Are you free?
Come on
I hop
over.
over.
Just come to Chicago and I've got you covered.
Cool.
Yeah.
I love Chicago. Don't invite me with a good time. You
Awesome.
watch out.
So it's only natural that I would think of identity and intersectionality through the lens of a cookbook, right? So there are multiple
Mm,
recipes and experiences that bring the book to life. And so I would kind of equal that too with how identity works. So an intersectional identity just allows for multiple experiences and cultures to inform how this identity operates in the world. Similar to how like your favorite recipe might work. And whether we're all aware of it or not, all of us hold intersectional identities. This isn't a bad word. This isn't a marker that will disassociate you from certain things. We all hold intersectional identities. So for me,
mm-hmm,
I am more than just a cisgendered male. I am also Black. I am also queer. I'm a person who resides in a bigger body that proudly takes up space. I am a first generation everything. I'm a person who has experienced improper housing, who grew up proudly in the working class. All of these pieces are sort of like a puzzle, and they really inform how I look at the world. They inform how I respond to things, but they also provide me certain levels of privilege and marginalization, right? So
mm,
personally, growing up with these identities, being poor, being Black, being queer, being first generation everything, a person who resides in a bigger body, a person from of the working class, all of these, a person who's experienced, improper housing and lack of housing, adversity has been weaved into the core of who I am and how I experience the world. I've dealt with bullies growing up. I have dealt with them in the corporate sector as well, though, probably less pronounced than kids on a bus or a playground. And as much as we continue to see this rhetoric on the fact that we live in a colorblind world or a non-woke world, a person with an intersectional identity can tell you that that just is not true. And anytime your identity stands out as different or ignites this fear in the status quo, you will inevitably be challenged, whether it be overtly or covertly. And this all could happen in staffing decisions, with how clients, what sort of opportunities you're presented with, how clients interact with you, for example. All of these roles kind of inform how you play out in the world, essentially. So I would say professionally being Black and queer, that has been the most difficult part of my intersectional identity to navigate. Um, but I'm super happy to be here today, and I'm proud to have used these experiences to leverage who I am and how I show up in the world and in the corporate sector as well.
yeah. Thank you for that, Tyler. I love what you were saying when you both were framing this, is that intersectionality is not a bad word. I love that you said that, because by claiming all of your intersectionalities as you both have, it's empowering and it's inspiring. And also, I feel like it lets the air out of the tension out of the room, right? Like, oh, I can't say it unless she says it and all this stuff. And you're just like, this is who I am, this is who I'm at. Like for me, like I'm queer, I'm non-binary, I'm neurospicy, as I like to call it, like I got a few things of my own. Also a dog dad, so I see you, little cat person there, Tyler. Um, but like what it gives, like empowers me when I claim those things, but it took a little while to be comfortable to, because it is vulnerable, right? It's a vulnerable act to claim these things publicly at times. And I'm curious, how do y'all navigate that when you are being mindful about how you show up with people? And has it, sometimes we get pushback, right? Or maybe they'll show up, like you said, in obvious and subtle ways and microaggressions. How do you navigate those experiences when you're moving through them, when they're challenging, let's say? Kenny, would you like to kick us off here?
Yeah, I say, when I think I'm a fundamentally optimistic person. And so
Mm,
I think that that helps me weather sometimes really difficult moments. But I want to harken back to something Tyler said earlier, like this determination to take up space. I take up space, and that's my way of I guess navigating those challenges. That I get real comfortable because I believe that if you were invited into a room, you have a seat at the table. And if you have a seat at the table, you can speak. And so I don't wait for someone to give me permission. By me being in that space, I get settled and I get comfortable. But I also think that um, one of the things that makes it easier in these difficult moments is to remember, particularly when I'm in the position of being the first or the only or the different, what that means and the higher resonance of that and who I am doing it for that comes behind me. That is a really big motivator for me. And so just this idea of kind of lifting as you climb. And as I was thinking about today and preparing for this panel, this quote by Toni Morrison kept kind of resonating with me, and it's one that I've turned to regularly in my life. And I want to read it because I want to make sure to get it right. And it's, when you get these jobs that you have been so brilliantly trained for, just remember that your real job is that if you are free, you need to free someone else. And if you have some power, then your job is to empower somebody else. This is not a grab bag candy game. And that is how I live my life.
yes, yes. I'm going to give a shout out to Elizabeth in the chat listening in. Elizabeth says, I'm an immigrant myself from the Caribbean. This is a conversation I need to hear. I'm new and different and seeking employment in a country where no one knows my experience and strengths.
Elizabeth, I am proud of you for doing something that is difficult. It is difficult to leave somewhere that you know and come somewhere that is new and perhaps where you don't know as many people. And I hope that you see that your difference makes you unique. You see something that someone else doesn't see. You have an experience. You have something to offer in every space that you're in. And so I hope that you land well, and that your journey is as gentle as it can be.
Mm, mm. Tyler, when you and Kenny also, I'm sorry, Tyler, just if you're invited to the room, you have a seat at the table, or if you're invited to the table, you have a voice. It's so important to be reminded of that, no matter what the context, right? It's like I have value, I am here. And if my little imposter syndrome brain is telling me otherwise, I have to remember that is not real. I didn't sneak into this in this invitation. I get the opportunity to talk to you two right now. Like that's a huge gift that I get to talk to you. And people are like, yeah, we want you to talk to these people. When I first started this job, I was like, what? I'm an actor. What are you talking about? I don't belong here. And it took a year of doing conversations at Power to Fly before I realized that I was actually like I didn't sneak my way in or something, or that I was going to keep doing it, or that I was actually, I could say to myself, I enjoy this and I'm good at this and I have value. Like that, it took me a year of talking to people like you to like that are teaching the group. I was really learning the one I was that first year. I was all just like, they are talking directly to me right now, and so it's so important, right? Like it is can be incessant, that voice that is in the back that is trying to bring us down. That is, I don't actually think it's my voice though, you know. I think it's learned behavior from somewhere else. Tyler, can you speak to, has imposter syndrome come up for you? How do you manage it? How do you help other people through it?
Oh, every day it comes up for me. There are so many times when I'm in a room or in a meeting and I'm like, do I belong here?
Mm,
Um, and not to quote Billie Eilish, but I'm like, what was I made for? What am I doing here? What is the purpose of having me on this call today? But I have to always remind myself, and I'm so happy that Akinyi has brought this point up that, yes, having a seat at the table is fundamentally important, but if you don't find that table, build it. Go out there and build it, fight for it. There have been so many
mm,
opportunities and times in my life where I've had to fight literally to get to where I am. And that has made me the person that I am, and that has given me the rigor and the courage that I have to advocate for myself. And I'm sure I have a lot of colleagues who are probably smiling at this right now, who are also watching me, but they can attest to the fact that I will call something out if it does not sit right with me. I will have the courage, and sometimes to my own detriment, to make things right, and I think we have
mm,
that as much as we have that voice in our head that is telling us that we don't belong here. There's also a voice in our heart that tells us that we have to make things right, and this is the path that we have to walk to go do it. Um,
mm,
and so yes, that imposter syndrome voice is constantly in my head, but you have to fight it. And if you don't see the opportunity for yourself in whatever space or sector that you're in, go make that opportunity. Fight for it.
mm,
Position yourself in a way where you are seen as the go-to person so that you are constantly being brought those opportunities, and you're mapping out your career in the way that works best for you.
I was one of
mm,
those. I was smiling as you were saying that, Tyler, because I think that you do that every day, and I'm really proud to work with you, and that you live your values. But I mean, as you were talking, I kept even thinking about. I'm sure some people who are listening in may have seen the interview that Taraji P Henson gave recently about just like how tiring it is when, especially when you are the one who comes first or the one who's the trailblazer, to constantly have to fight. And she was talking about just that motivation of the people who would come up to her and say thank you. And probably there were years
mm,
where she didn't know that people were thanking her silently. And I'm sure, Tyler, you don't realize how many people thank you silently for the work that you do every day. But I think that can be such a huge motivator. And, in Taraji's case, she went out and created the films that she wanted to be in, right? Viola Davis did much the same thing. And those films
mm,
have gone on to win awards and accolades because they saw the opportunity and created it, even if no one was willing to give it to them.
mm. I love that you just brought up Viola Davis. I'm reading Finding Me, her autobiography right now, which is so good. And if you want to be humbled at even the greatest minds and talents have imposter syndrome, she talks about that story. She opens the book with, she's working with Will Smith for the first time. He's like, yeah, but who are you? She's like, what do you mean, Will Smith? He's like, yeah, but who are you really? She's like, and she tells the story as how she was a bedwetter, for late in life. And she's like, at the end of the day, I'm still that 11-year-old girl that just reeks and she has to go to school.
Mm.
And you're like, you are the best, most powerful woman, one of them out there. I just got teary-eyed just talking about it right now. And it's, I don't know, it's just this human thing, right? That wants to hold us back, but also when we're able to see it, right, it can be empowering, right? To be like, oh, I came from that, I learned from that, and now I, like you said earlier, like our job is to if help other people, right? With that beautiful quote you were reading, like I can take that experience, I can help someone that has also been through that or has had been dishomed or a rough upbringing or whatever it is. That is my value. That's my gift to give to other people to help them. So I just love that you're both doing that, and it sounds clearly. Um, Tyler, you also talked about, you're going to call stuff out, right? You're going to call
Oh
stuff
yeah.
out if it doesn't sit right with you. Talk to me about healthy conflicts. So how do you manage that?
Oh yeah, my my husband probably doesn't like the fact that I
He's going to tell you about all the other stuff, but he's not on the call. I'm
yeah,
talking to you,
and
Tyler.
I'm
It's
sure
fine.
he's somewhere
Our
in the chat
husbands
right now
kiki
saying you
about
don't see
us
him arguing
later.
with the neighbors. Yeah. No, I love this idea of healthy conflict. I'm a person who I do not shy away from conflict. I think I grew up with a single parent. It was just me and her. We've been through anything that you can probably think of. And it's just me and her. So I have no siblings, no network of support.
Mm,
Growing up, I had to really advocate for myself. If I did not like something, if I did not agree with something, of course, thankfully for her, she taught me how to do so in a very diplomatic and professional way. And I've learned throughout my career that you are always welcome to call things out if things do not sit right with you. It's just how you say it and how you do it and how you go about doing it with
mm,
style to get the person to see what you really want them to see. And I love the idea that, if something does not sit right with you, especially as a person with an intersectional identity, who often will encounter bias, who often will encounter stereotyping in the corporate setting and in the academic setting as well, that you're able to not be afraid. Again, it's a matter about how you do it. So I remember I had to give feedback to someone who was a bit more senior than me, and of course I was very scared to do so. But I remember that they're human too, and they also in their professional journey they need to hear this feedback, just like I would be asking a Kenny or someone else in our team to give me the feedback that I need to succeed and be motivated within my career. But it's again how you do it. So it wasn't like I just outwardly told the person, hey, I don't like that you do XYZ. It's really professionally pulling them to the side, creating a safe space for them to hear what you're having to say and creating that relationship where you're able to challenge them in a healthy way, to your point, on the change behavior that you want to see. So I think we all have the ability to do that. And I would just encourage our emerging and our seasoned leaders on the call to not be afraid to do that and to always think of that framework of pulling someone to the side in a very private way and letting them know how you feel. And this is the change behavior that I would love to see come out of this conversation today.
mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Akini, is there without naming names, is there a particular instance of a specific conversation that you had with someone where you did something like that? And how did that go? What was the outcome?
Oh, that's an interesting one. I have also been on a journey at home and in my friendships and at work to embrace conflict and to not view conflict as a bad thing. Conflict, and when it's healthy conflict,
Hmm.
is a gift because it's an opportunity to learn. And
Yeah.
so I think that I came from a background where, very stiff upper lip, don't show your emotions, hold things in. And I've realized over time that when you do that, people are like sponges and it builds and builds and builds. And if you keep letting that happen, it'll take the wrong thing to hit that sponge and it just floods out. And so
Hmm.
I've been on a journey, especially professionally, to figure out what are the appropriate moments to be a little bit vulnerable and share what I'm thinking. Um, and just to answer your question specifically on a moment, I think that there was an instance in which I disagreed with someone who was more senior to me than me about how we were doing things. And I felt that um, as we were kind of debating approaches to problems, she was very dismissive of the other approaches. And I thought, rather than get frustrated and angry at how this is being handled, I want to start with thinking about what are we trying to do together? Like, what is the shared goal? Because if we can agree on
Mm.
that and if we can start there, then that's the starting point for the conversation. Um, and so from there, we began to see, like, okay, this is why you're viewing it this way. This is why I'm viewing it this way. And there's things that we can learn from both of those perspectives. But it was like, what is the goal? And also this openness to I am not always right. And I tell and tell you probably heard me say this to people on my teams. I never presume I have the monopoly on being right. I have a perspective that is based on my experience, but you could, even if it's the most junior person, they could have an idea that is better than mine. And we don't and broaching that doesn't have to generate conflict if we do it
Hmm.
politely, respectfully.
Right. Yeah. What is the goal? It's so valuable, right? Because a friend of mine gave me similar advice not too long ago. And when you start with that point, then we're unified in from the start, as opposed to like, you said this thing I don't like. And if you start with what do we want to achieve together, like you said, then the things that didn't work, they're going to come up anyway, right? But we're creating this, it's a psychological safety, right? And it's creating a safe space and a container for like, I see you, I respect you, and I'd like to talk to you about this thing. So
It took a lot of coaching and a lot of therapy to get there, but we're here.
yeah, here we are, still working on it.
It's so funny you mentioned that, Kenny, because I remember a time in my career very, very earlier, excuse me, when I wish I would have had that courage, right? Like when I wish, like the Tyler that you see today has not always been this version of Tyler. And I know my husband can also attest to that. Um, and I remember in my early stages of my career, I will never forget this. I think this has left such an impression on why I show up the way that I do in the workplace. I worked for a nonprofit and I had a leader who, I guess she and I just were not seeing eye to eye. And maybe I was a little bit too direct in certain areas, and maybe she, like, it was just this give and take relationship. But I remember she had pulled me into her office and she had asked me to like have a discussion with her on, how I was presenting myself in the workplace, how I was coming off to her. And I remember, the conversation just, it didn't make me feel good. It did not sit right with me. Um, and she had asked me to clean her office before I had left to go back into my workspace. And it was one of the most humiliating experiences I think I've ever had in my career. And she stood there doing her work on her laptop, asking me to organize her folders, asking me to like, make things look cute and neat. And I'm pretty sure she was stereotyping me through a variety of shades that I hold through my intersectional identity. But I remember feeling like, damn, like I hear this Black gay man is being asked by this person, this leader, to clean their office while they sit here and do work. And this is not in my job description, and this is not within the parameter of the scope of work that I'm supposed to be doing. And I think this person is doing it because maybe they feel that I'm a bit too big for my britches, so to speak. And I think I wish I could go back in time today. I think that is one of the biggest regrets I have in my career, to go back in time today to tell young Tyler, like, you do not need to put up with that. And what this person is asking you to do is highly inappropriate. And I think this is why I advocate so loudly in the workspace, in my work, in my workplace, because I never want anyone to feel how minimized I felt in that moment. So my biggest piece of encouragement for those watching who are a bit earlier in their career or who are emerging within their career is to don't have the regret that I had. Like, please, please find a way to pull someone in, or if in that moment, call that leader out.
Mm.
And I think, Tyler, I am so sorry that happened to you. And I'm not surprised to hear that happened, in the sense that I think when you see someone who's highly empathetic and attuned, it often comes from a place of something has happened and they have said not again, or this will not happen to me, or this will not happen to others. And I had an experience where I mean, it's sad that so many of us have these experiences, but I had an experience where I was working at a conference, and a senior leader asked me to work the floor and distribute some swag and food as a part of the draw to get people to stop by our booth. And I think if they had stopped for a minute and thought about what does it mean to ask a Black woman at a majority white conference to do that, they would have realized what I'm going to tell you happened next, which was that people thought I was the wait staff and passed me their trash. And it was humiliating. I felt small. I felt alone, and I didn't say anything to anyone for months because but it really bothered me, and it made me think every time I entered spaces like that, oh, do people think I should be here? It made me question, like I would probably spend 30-40 minutes trying to figure out what I was going to wear, because I had to project the right image so that this would not happen to me again. And I say that to say that's not an experience of conflict, but it is in the sense of like conflict within yourself, right? When you begin then to internalize and battle with yourself day on day because you haven't called out the thing that is wrong. Mm-hmm. So I wish I had said to that gentleman, no, actually, I am a member of the team. I'm here to, talk about the product. Happy to give you this gift as a part of this, but that this is not why I'm here. Or similarly, that I told that senior leader beforehand, I'm not comfortable doing this because of the long history of how Black people are stereotyped and treated in these settings.
Mhm.
So, as much as we talk about healthy conflict with other people, I think we have to be mindful of how we manage that conflict and that war within ourselves when we're faced in these difficult situations, with these difficult
Yeah,
situations.
That is so
absolutely.
painful, Kenny. I'm sorry you had to go through that too. That is unacceptable.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm sorry you both had to go through that. It's your individual experiences there. And I think what you said, Kenny, too, is so poignant that when you see deep empathy in someone, it's usually because they went through a negative experience that they're trying to help other people not go through that. And it really is horrible that's the way we learn, unfortunately, that things like that is propelled. Yeah, but it is it is inspiring to see like how both of y'all have taken some of these awful experiences that have happened and that you're able to use that as a signpost, right? Like that's unacceptable, never again, not for anybody else, not on my watch. Tyler's going to call it out. So we have just about 25 minutes left. So friends, for those of you listening, uh, feel free to chime in with any experiences, thoughts, things that you relate to, things that are different for you. We'd love to hear from you. Questions are welcome as well, and we will touch on those as well. So in the next half an hour, and again, you were speaking to this one scenario, but I'm sure there are other scenarios, and I know a lot of people can relate to this feeling of tokenism, being the only one. You were in that conference, you were one of the only Black women there. A horrible assumption was made about you based off of systemic racism. When it's a different scenario, when you are the only one, but you do have a seat at the table, right? Or in a context where you are the only one, but you also have these intersectional identities. How do you balance between recognizing the intersectionality and also that trap of tokenism that maybe is happening around you?
It's interesting, and I think it's a hard balance to strike. I think, and actually, I want to speak to something that's a really interesting dynamic because for some people, being a token can actually end up being a good thing. Like
Mm,
there is this phenomenon called the glass escalator, and you see that in industries and occupations where men are underrepresented. They actually will get to leadership positions faster. And so, for example, in the restaurant industry, right, you have a lot of women, but there is a reason you see male chefs more. Or whereas female tokens tend to have a more difficult time getting to leadership positions. Now you add being Black, and then welcome, to my life. But I think directly to answer your question on like how do you navigate tokenism, um, I think that you have to be really discerning about intention versus action, and make sure that people's ambition matches the resources they have available, and that they're not talking, but they have a willingness to back it up. I will not let
mm,
myself be used if I do not see that there is real support and resources behind me. So ask probing questions before you agree to anything. Like understand the
mm,
whole landscape of what you're signing yourself up for, because you don't want to be the person kind of left out at the end of the day, with this gargantuan task, and no support structure around you. So that's one thing. And I think especially if you're wary of being tokenized in the corporate setting, I'll speak to, make sure you understand how the work that you're doing ties back to the core business imperative so that it is relevant and timely, and that it's actually something that can be used to advance you versus something that they're
Mm,
doing because they want to check a box.
right. Yeah. Tyler, how about you?
Yeah, I think that is so imperative. I think for me, some of the recommendations I would give for folks who feel like they've been tokenized and for corporates who continue to put, marginalized people within that horrible, horrible scenario would be just to not put people in a box. I think for me, I've struggled with that throughout my career where people have thought because I'm gay, like I'm sassy or I'm fashion oriented. That just because I'm gay doesn't mean my opinion is the most sound for fashion. You know what I mean? Like things like that.
Mhm.
I
I
have my
laugh
own,
because I can relate.
yes.
I'm like, I'm wearing a
um,
fun shirt today, but you should see what I wear on the weekends. This is
yeah,
not
yeah,
fashion forward.
yeah. I have my own personality and my own biases that even as a queer individual, like I have to confront and I have to always kind of unlearn and relearn. And it's a consistent and constant process. Another area where I find myself often being tokenized is especially during Heritage Months. And Kenny, to your point, no, I will not be used. You will not be slapping my face to promote Pride Month. You will not be slapping on my face or my quote to promote your Black History Month program. I'm just not going to do it. Um, I really want to encourage my colleagues and the people who are watching to engage people throughout the year. So don't just come to me when you need counsel on like what should I say for Pride Month or what should I do for Black History Month? Like if you care so deeply about these communities and these stakeholders, find a way to please, please, please engage them year round. It is not hard to talk to a Black person outside of Black History Month. It is not hard to talk to a queer individual or someone from the LGBTQIA community outside of June, outside of Pride Month. So I think those are just simple solutions that, we can all proactively engage with to make sure that people don't fall into those traps.
Hmm. Yeah. There's some really wonderful things coming in, some really powerful stuff coming in from the chat here that I'd like to shine a light on. Someone wrote earlier when we were talking about our previous conversation or previous topic. This reminds me of when I was a magistrate, and an attorney who saw me in the administration office asked me to make him copies. I gave him a look and said, and I gave him a look and he said, "Is making copies not your job?" I said no and walked away.
To
Very
keep that
nice.
energy, I love that response.
1000%. Yes.
Nope. Goodbye. Yeah, love that. And that, or I love your the way you showed up for it. I don't love that it happened to you. I'm sorry that happened to you. Um, Another comment from the chat here. Jermaine says, "Thank you for sharing and being so vulnerable about your tough experiences you both went through. It shouldn't be your job to educate or pay it back, but it is so helpful to be validated from leaders like yourselves that we can speak up to injustices. Many of us are so scared. Many of us are so scared in the moment to speak up due to fear of being fired, attacked, or laughed at, or when in reality, speaking up for yourself and what is right is important, imposter syndrome aside."
I know we are on a roll of sharing quotes, but I'm hoping that people watch Abbott Elementary because it's like one of
Oh,
my,
yeah.
and I need to get back into watching it. But and Jermaine, thank you so much for sharing that. I really appreciate that. And I do empathize deeply with the fear of of receiving backlash. But one of my favorite quotes from Elementary, and I'm pulling it up right now so I do not forget it. It involves a garden, quotes. So whenever you feel the need that imposter syndrome is in your ear or that you're feeling that you are going to receive this backlash, and this is from the show, from one of the characters, Barbara. People have thrown dirt on my name and others have given me flowers, but it's all garden to me. So please remember that when you're in those moments, in those heated moments, and people are giving you that backlash, or people are also giving your accolades for standing up and doing the right thing, remember that it's all a garden. and that good and bad times will come, but you should never be afraid to meet the moment head on. So that would just be my thought.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you for that. I love that show as well too. It's like, yeah. Um, so we have about almost a little over 15 minutes left. So friends that are chiming in, thank you very much for sharing openly, candidly, vulnerably. Vulnerability is a act of bravery. Thank you. To paraphrase Brene Brown there. I'd love to hear from both of you. How do you leverage your unique perspectives and intersectionality and your experiences to drive positive change within your organizations?
That is a really good question. One I think is there's so many examples that I think we can pull from. I'd say for me, my intersectional identity has really taken root and blossomed in my own office through some of the learning and development uh, strategies that I've wanted to implement and lead on, bringing in diverse voices to teach our staff on giving and receiving culturally competent feedback. I think that has been a really proud moment for me, leveraging the fact that we are having intersectional leaders across our ERGs come present to our office in Chicago to share how we can really, especially when we think about the season of performance reviews, leverage this idea of like giving culturally and sound and intentional and empathetic feedback. I think that for me has been super helpful.
Mm,
Um, yeah, I think another way that I've been able to just leverage this my intersectional identity within my workplace has also just been really trying to be proud of who I am and where I come from and making that a footprint and literally everything I do. I know a lot of my colleagues are probably tired of it. But I think I think it shows up in the way that I lead on teams, always trying to give people space to share their feedback. And Kenny, I love your earlier point too on, you know, I'm not always the right person. We're always happy to leverage feedback that way. But yeah, I would say in the ways that I've led as an ERG leader, and then in the ways in which I've tried to diversify our local learning and development strategies within APCO have been ways in which I've leveraged my intersectional identity to create that change.
Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
Tyler, to that I'd add, at least in my experience, I have been, it wasn't something actually I immediately thought of, but something as I reflected, we just came out of performance review season. As I reflected back on like recent years, I think my intersectionality has also been helpful in terms of new business, to be quite honest, because it means that I'm part of multiple networks. It means that there are different points of connection that I have with many different people, and that has been an unexpected benefit. And I mean, especially if you're in a client services role, um, you most of the time, unless you're extraordinarily lucky, your clients have lots of options on who they can work with. They want to work with
Mm-hmm.
someone that they really like and share and share something with, whether that's, and it doesn't have to be appearance wise, right? It's not to say that every Black leader wants to work with another Black leader, every woman wants to work with another woman, but someone who shares some common interest or some common story, etc. And I think that leaning into that has been enabled me to connect with people on different levels about shared experiences. For example, there was a leader, actually, who's a white man, who similarly had kind of had this childhood of being in lots of different places, and we could bond and trade stories over that, and really developed a wonderful rapport based on those shared experiences, and that led to a new business opportunity. So you have, I think, a lot of times people think, especially if you're coming from a historically underrepresented or underserved community, that, oh, maybe I don't have access to the same networks and resources. You do. Like someone's cousin, someone's friend, your college roommate, people with influence. And it's just about finding the ways to activate that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that makes me think of tying it back to our theme here of our intersectionality being our superpower, right? Where we can actually connect with all these people. And it's such a wonderful example of how you and this man actually have quite a bit to connect on. And there's an intersectionality that, might not be on the DE&I checklist there, right? But there is something there to that. And that's really wonderful. And that takes investigation and vulnerability, right? Like, I don't even know how that conversation started with you two, but like it did. You found it. You had the bravery to talk about something like that. That's fantastic. So, how are ways that organizations can educate their leadership teams and employees on the importance of what we're talking about today with intersectionality and its impact on innovation and productivity?
I'm happy to take a pass at this. I think there are many different routes that employers and executive leaders and companies could take in adding to this conversation. I think one, I would really encourage leaders across the board to really begin focusing their efforts on building a culture of courage and excellence within their organization. I think bottom line, that is the base where we need to start. It is okay to be wrong. It is okay to not have the answer. It is okay to have a faux pas, but we need to correct these wrongs when we see them, especially in bias. When we see bias, when we see active disenfranchisement in the workplace towards intersectional identities, I think it starts there. If you have that culture of courage, of calling things out when it just does not sit right with you in a very diplomatic and professional way, I think that's one route. I would also really encourage employers and leaders to never mistake tenure for talent. And by that, I mean, I really want people to begin actively reaching across the aisle and across industries for diverse talent with interchangeable and transferable skill sets. And I think in that way, you'll find the intersectional employee you need to fit the role within your organization and to drive this change forward. So never mistake tenure for talent. Just because someone has been at your organization for years and years and years does not mean that there isn't extensive and different talent that you could be pulling from to put people in the right places where they need to be within an organization. And then I think my last couple of points, I would say it is on leaders and it is on managers to call out discrimination and bias when it is reported and to believe their employees and their people. There is a reason why a person with an intersectional identity are, even if they feel like they don't have one, that they're coming to their manager, that they're coming to their leader to report a problem. And it is on the manager and that leader within the organization to believe that person and to do something about it. Um, and then overall, I would say when we look at overarching strategies that leaders are trying to implement across the board in their organizations or within their DEI programs, I feel like a lot of times we employers and leaders tend to focus their DEI initiatives on single diverse identities. So yeah, Kenny, you know how I feel. Really, singling out just women, right? For example, when we're doing that, we are ignoring the fact that there are so many other identities, for example, that we could be working with to build transformative change in an organization only by identifying and focusing on one diverse group of people. And if we look at that, for example, if we're only looking at women, for example, and we're tying ourselves to the binary, we are not allowing ourselves an opportunity to grow and to reflect on driving this transformative change forward. So I think those are just a few. I always have many if others are happy to call these out in the chat. But yes, we definitely need to build this culture of courage and excellence to never mistake tenure for talent at an organization and to really lean on our leaders and managers to do the right thing and to believe things when they are told and reported.
I don't know how one adds to that because I mean, I learn from Tyler every day, but I'm like, there's so many quotables, especially the culture of courage and excellence. Yes. I mean, my one addition would be my pet peeve is when you get these employee engagement surveys and they're really only asking you for quant data. I would love for every employer to complement that with not only like the short answers, yes, talk to people, like have a focus group, have a town hall, have small group sessions where you actually get the color of people's experiences, because that quantitative data is only a snapshot, and to get the whole picture you really need to speak to people and get their experiences. And I think also to analyze that data through different lenses. So, for example, if you're only looking at, okay, what do women think? But if you're looking at what do Black women think, you might get a very different answer about what about the challenges in your workplace. I mean, to give you one concrete example of where I think you would see a very different answer if you looked at it through the lens of intersectional identity. A lot of people right now are talking about the importance of, yes, of caregiving. And when we think about caregiving, we're often thinking about children. But if we look at Black and Latino households, Black and Latino households in particular, you're more likely to be supporting someone who is beyond a child, a parent, an aunt, someone in the extended family. So we're talking about caregiving. That conversation has to extend beyond that. But if you only cut the data by gender, you wouldn't kind of get the nuances there of the needs of your workforce. You need to dig deeper.
Yeah, and that is such a perfect example with intersectionality and cultural differences, right? There's a lot of in white America. It's just like they're old, get them out, like ship them off to old. It's like no, pretty much everywhere else in the world is like, are you bananas? They're your parents. Like keep them. You got to take care of them. And so yeah, the extension of care goes beyond that, and that it is much more complex than that. Um, in
Can
these
I just
last couple
add
of minutes,
one cherry
oh
on top
please,
of
yes,
that?
Tyler,
And I
please.
love all of these points. And I would say at the end of the day, we all, the three of us on this call, everyone joining this panel, we need to also remember that the organizations, the leadership, the companies that we most admire, that we hold to these high accolades, everything is built on this like white supremacist and white colonialism belief, right? This set of beliefs. I feel like if we all took the time that we needed to as employers, as well as employees and individual leaders within our companies to undo and unlearn these behaviors, I guarantee everyone on this call that like we would not have to be having this conversation. I guarantee you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And to that point, Tyler, so there's because of these old systems, white supremacy is underneath everything here that we're talking about. And there's a lot of people resisting the changes that we are talking about. How do you, when you're encountering resistance, how do you move through that when you're working with a team, a leader, maybe an organization? How do you move through that resistance?
I think that's so poignant, just given that where companies and employers are also facing this like resistance, especially for those who are really committed to DEI right now. All of the backlash that we're seeing, the legal backlash, the moral backlash that we're seeing on DEI programming and initiatives from our lovely friends on the right, unfortunately. Um, I do think that when I'm encountering this resistance, whether it be internally within myself or with another leader, I have to remind
Mm,
myself that we are all fighting a battle that has been so deeply embedded into our systems, into the ways that we think, into the ways into how we perceive things, that I have to remember that and my husband is also going to tell me this a lot. I have to remember what hill is worth dying on. Some hills are worth dying on. Some hills are worth taking a
mm,
sword and going out in a blaze of glory. Some hills are not worth that because I think the ultimate tool of this white supremacist, white colonialistic framework that we're talking about, the ultimate strategy that it wants to implement is fatigue, right? It wants to tire us out. It wants to continue to put us through resistance to the point where we don't want to fight anymore. So I would
mhm,
encourage everyone on the call, and the three of us included, when we're going through people who are giving us pushback, when we're encountering leaders who want to resist us, we have to keep that in mind to take care of ourselves personally and professionally so that and to know and to have discernment to know, hey, this is a hill where I actually think that this is worth me going toe to toe in a very professional way and using data and using informed decision making to showcase where I'm coming from. But also sometimes that this moment probably isn't the moment for me. There's a bigger battle that I have to kind of circumvent around, and I have to put my eye towards the prize with.
mm.
Tyler, what you said reminds me of something a very dear friend of mine always tells me is that anger is expensive. So you have to decide when when you want to spend that energy. And I also think, I guess I would say I'm someone who's fundamentally curious about people. And when I see such a visceral response, especially when I don't understand it, I get curious as to why.
Mm,
So, when I think there's, primary emotions or secondary emotions. If someone's angry, like what is driving the anger? Is
mhm,
it sadness? Is it anxiety? Like, so and I think when you begin to think that way, you then can figure out what is the best way to address that emotion. But I also think don't let people, as you respond, to respond graciously, but also the best response to someone who's flying off the handle or when there's anger is calm and control and logic and reason. And to
mhm,
Tyler's point, data.
mhm. Anger is expensive. I love that. That's going on my wall. There's one that I think about too, that you mentioned therapy. I'm a big advocate for self-care and therapy in that way. And I had a therapist that told me, strike when the iron is cold for myself. So when I can be cool, calm, and collected, I'm like, oh, I'm like, sometimes anger is
Yeah,
appropriate to act on, right? And not always, because I don't want to bottle
exactly.
stuff up. There's an appropriate time for it. But to know for me, like, oh, okay, this is a time when I've cooled off a little bit, and now I might still I might still access that anger, but it's a way that I am now at least comfortable in myself expressing that anger. Yeah. So we're about to wrap up. Thank you both so much for this in-depth conversation, speaking so personally, both of you. I applaud you. I thank you for sharing that, your experiences with an open heart and an open mind on this call. Thank you. It's a gift. It's truly a gift to do this with you. Um, what is the best way for folks to keep the conversation going with you, to reach out, ask questions? How do you like to be contacted?
You can feel free to find me on LinkedIn. Reach out there. That's an easy way. And yeah, I think that's the best way to stay in touch.
Likewise, yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn. And if you work with me, just shoot me an email or a Teams chat.
Amazing, amazing. And Tyler will have you over for dinner. Maybe
You
you'll
are
watch what
always
looks like,
welcome. You and
yeah,
Kenny are always welcome over to my place for dinner. You will
we'll
just have
watch
to
a
deal with
Miyazaki
very
movie,
annoying
maybe. I
cats.
see some
Yes,
Miyazaki
yes.
nerdy stuff over there. Okay, I see you Spirited Away. I got you.
Yes, I'm a very, very big nerd in addition to being a very big cook for my family. Yes,
Sounds like heaven. Sounds like heaven. You have a lucky man. That's your husband, clearly. And I will remind him, you can play this clip to him, okay?
I will.
All right. Thank you both so much again for this wonderful call. I hope we get to do it again. Thank you so much.
Thank
Thank you.
you for this wonderful conversation. Bye.
Thank you
All
all.
right. Take
Bye-bye.
care now.